So my goal in this show every week is to bring people that can educate us and empower us on these certain topics, and no one better than Mary Brimer with Ginger Green Financial, who is here with us today talking about college planning.
And how you can use your real estate to pay for college. Very important. Most people don't even think about college planning until about the junior year of high school, when the phone starts to ring on those robo lists from school saying, hey, we're having a college planning tonight. And sadly, it's a little too late to start in your junior year of high school planning for how you're going to pay for college. And in fact, if you can give us a 48-month lead time, we can probably help you out significantly, reducing the financial burden, because people, they tend to put things off and procrastinate, right?
Oh, yeah.
And, retirement's later and college is later. And especially if you have more than one child, it can be extremely difficult. So the average cost of a private education is over $40,000 a year when you factor in the tuition. A year. Now, if you have more than one kid, that's a lot of money. A couple of things that I just want to bring to everybody's attention. There's a number of ways as planners that we can help you reduce that out-of-pocket cost, and there's a lot of moving parts, and the sooner that we start planning on it, the better. So one of the most popular ways to save is in a 529 savings plan, college-bound fund, and now it's, I want to say Invesco is the plan sponsor here in Rhode Island. It used to be AllianceBernstein. Yes, thank you. So there's not a lot of benefit if you're going to contribute. I believe the state allows you a $500 tax credit, not deduction, for contributing to these 529 plans. You have to be within certain income limits. But the big benefit of a 529 savings plan is you can have unlimited personal income to contribute to them for college, and you're unlimited just about in your contributions. The maximum that you can have in a 529 plan is $250,000, which would be a very nice Ivy League school college tuition.
1 year tuition.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, right. So the problem with 529s is that they're often open too late or they're not funded. And the most important thing that I can share with our listeners in this particular segment is, if you are going to open a 529 college fund, please have that fund owned by your grandparents, the grandparents of the child, your parents, your in-laws. The grandparents must be the owner of the 529 plan. And the reason why is because when you have to fill out the FAFSA form to send your kid to college, all of your assets come into play. If you, as the parent, are not the account owner of that 529 plan, you do not need to disclose that as an asset.
That's awesome.
Because the school wants you to utilize all of your resources. So the benefit of a 529 is it all grows like an IRA. It grows tax deferred, and it all comes out tax free so long as it's used for qualified higher educational expenses. All right, so here's the big thing that most people completely miss, and I'm going to go very quickly here, but this is important. How do we calculate who's responsible for paying for what? And there's this thing called the expected parental contribution. So the big question I get from students and from parents is, why do I have to disclose my tax return? Why am I not why am I a dependent? I'm filing my own tax return. Well, here's how the government looks at it. Most people can exclude most of their assets through exclusions and allowances, and only 12% of the remainder is considered available assets. So what's an available asset? The unavailable assets would be an employer-sponsored retirement plan, such as a 401k, 403b, IRAs, annuities, life insurance. Primary residence is excluded. Then the formula subtracts an education savings and asset protection allowance. This is why I said have the grandparents own the 529.
Smart.
This allowance is based on the age of the older parent, and what remains is multiplied by 12% to calculate the parent's contribution from assets. The good news is that most people can exclude most of their assets through exclusions and allowances. Only 12% of the remainder is considered available assets, and even then the formula only earmarks at most 47% of this total for the child's education. The government is saying you are expected to pay for this. The parents are expected to kick in an equal amount to no more than 5.6% of unprotected assets during each year of school. So whatever you hold outside, savings accounts, brokerage accounts that are not considered retirement funds, and investment property, those assets get valued. And you are supposed to kick in 5.6% of those assets per year towards your child's education. Now, the good news is the government also feels that children should be responsible to kick in. The child's available income, assuming that they're not married, is calculated after subtracting federal, state, and Social Security taxes from an income protection allowance of $9,180 a year. That's basically a part-time job for most kids. The formula dictates that 50% of the remainder be contributed to the child's education. Students are also expected to contribute an amount equal to 20% of their assets each year. So if they have a savings account, they're expected to put in 20% from their savings account each year. And for every dollar over $9,180, the student is expected to put in 50 cents of each dollar after towards their own education.
Wow.
That is where the FAFSA comes into play, and it must be filed usually between March 1st and March 15th of every year, which can create a lot of stress for parents if you have some savvy investments that would generate a K-1. So because K-1s are typically not available till right around April 1st, creating lots of stress in the accounting world. But this is the formula. So what are ways that we can creatively pay for education? One of those ways is a home equity line of credit.
Okay.
Since your primary residence is a protected asset, you can borrow money up to 80% of the value of your home, use that for education, deduct every single dollar of interest from your tax return. And there's two caveats to this that I say in planning. Number one, there's no such thing as a free lunch. It's your kid's education, depending on how you're selecting the school and where they're going. If you're going to do a home equity line, take the time to go to an attorney and draft up a promissory note between you and your child. And you might want to have that included in your estate plan, because there might be some jealousy amongst siblings that one person got a $200,000 education and the other one didn't.
Yeah.
And so you might want to account for that on estate planning. But if you have a promissory note, the child's paying you back, you're collecting the full interest deduction for it, because on student loans, you're capped out at the amount of interest that you can deduct. The last piece that I will say, and I've done a lot of this, and there's well, some good reasons why. I'm a passionate life insurance broker. I'm a financial planner, but I'm very passionate about life insurance. I have a number of life insurance stories personally and amongst my client base. If you're going to go co-sign this level of debt for a child, it is the worst kind of debt that a person can possibly own, because it is unforgivable in bankruptcy and disability court. It is toxic debt as far as financial planners are concerned.
Yeah.
Put a term life insurance policy on your student before they go off to college. A $250,000 policy on an 18-year-old will cost you $10 a month.
Wow.
And the reason why is that if they're ever in a car accident or something happens and they die and you have co-signed all of this loan, you are personally on the hook for it. And most people would just want to die themselves rather than face all of the bills and everything. And it can put a parent in a bad situation who's grieving into bankruptcy. And it's still not forgivable in bankruptcy court. So for $10 a month for a couple of years, and you turn it over to the child afterwards, it's protection. And the same thing if the parent's co-signing, and you're creating debt against your overall retirement portfolio, you might want to do that too. Lastly, a dangerous way to do planning is to use a 401k. And so some parents are contributing the maximum. They're in their 50s, their kids are going to college, they're putting the maximum in the 401ks. You need to understand how your individual plan works at your employer, because the maximum 401k loan that a person can take is $50,000. Many plans only allow you to have one loan going at a given time. And you have to also differentiate whether it's for personal use or whether it's education or housing use. There's a difference. And how they'll allow you to borrow money. You can repay it back over 5 years. The danger is if you lose your job. Because then you will be 1099s. You'll get a 1099-R for the full amount unless it's repaid immediately. And most people, when they lose their job, don't have that money to repay within 30 days. Otherwise, it becomes taxable to them at the end of the year. And that can create a tax avalanche on people, especially if they're getting severance and they're getting 1099 for that. Maybe they're getting stock options, and it can create a very bad time. So there's a number of methods that we use, and the more years that we have in advance to plan for this, we can create a plan that gives you discipline. So when you're doing your school selection, you can say to your child, this is what we can contribute. This is the maximum.